The winter storm hit Nashville with a vengeance that February evening, turning the city's iconic streets into sheets of ice beneath a relentless assault of freezing rain. Temperature had plummeted to 23 degrees, and the wind carried a bite that cut through even the heaviest coats. The neon lights of Broadway's honky-tonks reflected off the wet pavement, creating kaleidoscopic patterns that would have been beautiful if not for the dangerous conditions. Reba McEntire sat in the back seat of her black SUV, watching the wipers struggle against the precipitation as her driver, James Crawford, navigated the treacherous roads with careful precision. She'd just finished a late rehearsal session at Ocean Way Studios, working on arrangements for her upcoming album. Her throat was tired, her mind buzzing with melodies, and all she wanted was to get home to her warm house in the suburbs and curl up with a cup of tea. "It's getting worse out there, Ms. McEntire," James said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Weather Service just issued a severe winter storm warning. They're saying this could be the worst we've seen in 5 years. Just take your time, James. We'll get there when we get there," Reba replied, pulling her burgundy scarf tighter around her neck. She'd lived in Nashville long enough to respect what winter could do, even in Tennessee. As they turned onto a quieter street near the Gulch District, Reba noticed a figure huddled against a bus shelter. At first glance, she almost mistook it for a pile of discarded blankets. But then she saw the pale hand clutching what looked like a guitar case. "James, stop the car," she said suddenly. "Ma'am, stop the car. There's someone there." James pulled over carefully, hazard lights blinking amber into the storm. Reba opened her door before he could protest, the cold air hitting her like a physical force. She wrapped her coat tighter and hurried toward the shelter, her boots crunching on the ice-glazed sidewalk. The figure was a young man, maybe late 20s, wearing jeans that had seen better days, a thin jacket that was wholly inadequate for this weather, and a knit cap pulled low over his ears. His lips had a bluish tint, and his breathing was shallow. The guitar case he clutched was battered and covered in stickers from various music venues. "Oh my God," Reba breathed, kneeling beside him despite the wet ground soaking through her expensive pants. "Sir? Can you hear me?" The man's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His skin was ice-cold to the touch. James appeared beside her with an umbrella, his face creased with concern. "Ms. McEntire, we need to call 911. "Already on it," Reba said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. As she dialed, she noticed a worn wallet had fallen from the man's pocket. A Tennessee driver's license was visible through the plastic window. Dylan Garrett, age 28, with an address that she recognized as being in East Nashville's more affordable neighborhoods. The 911 dispatcher answered on the second ring. "911, what's your emergency?" "I'm at the corner of 11th Avenue South and Division Street. There's a young man here, unresponsive, showing signs of hypothermia. He needs an ambulance immediately," Reba spoke with the calm authority of someone used to handling pressure. "Ma'am, ambulances are experiencing significant delays due to the storm. It could be 20 to 30 minutes. Is the person breathing?" Reba checked, her hand trembling as she felt for breath beneath his nose. "Yes, but barely. He's freezing. What do I do?" "If you can safely transport him to the nearest emergency room, that would be faster. Vanderbilt University Medical Center is approximately 10 minutes from your location. If you move him, try to keep him warm and don't warm him too quickly. That can cause shock." Reba looked at James, who was already nodding. "We can do that. We're taking him to Vanderbilt." Between the two of them, they carefully lifted Dylan Garrett, his body frighteningly light. James opened the back door, and they settled the unconscious man across the seat. Reba climbed in after him, cradling his head in her lap, while James grabbed the guitar case and threw it in the back, before jumping into the driver's seat. "Go, James. Fast as you safely can." The SUV pulled back into traffic, James driving with practiced skill despite the conditions. Reba pulled off her own coat and draped it over Dylan, then removed her scarf and wrapped it around his neck. His face was gaunt. She noticed now in the better light. Not just cold, but thin from lack of proper food. There were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. "Hold on," she murmured, smoothing back the damp hair from his forehead. "Just hold on. You're going to be okay." Dylan's fingers twitched, still instinctively holding onto something, perhaps dreaming he was still clutching his guitar. That detail broke something in Reba's heart. She knew that grip. She'd had it herself once, a lifetime ago, when music was all she had and all she dreamed of having. The streets of Nashville blurred past, familiar landmarks made alien by the storm. The honky-tonks gave way to medical buildings, and then they were pulling up to Vanderbilt's emergency entrance, the bright lights a beacon of hope against the dark winter night. James barely had the car in park before Reba was shouting for help. 2 ER nurses and an orderly appeared with a wheelchair, quickly transitioning Dylan onto it, while peppering Reba with questions. How long was he outside? Does he have any ID? Is he on any medications? Reba followed them through the automatic doors into the bright, warm emergency room, answering what she could. "I don't know how long. I found his wallet. His name is Dylan Garrett. I don't know about medications. He was unconscious when I found him." A doctor appeared, young but competent-looking, already pulling on gloves. "We've got him from here, ma'am. If you could fill out what information you have at the desk, that would be helpful." "I'm staying," Reba said firmly. "I'm the one who brought him in. I want to make sure he's okay." The doctor looked at her more closely, recognition flickering across his features. "Ms. McEntire?" "Of course. 3rd floor waiting room will be more comfortable. We'll keep you updated." For the next 2 hours, Reba sat in that waiting room, still in her damp clothes, clutching Dylan Garrett's battered guitar case on her lap. James had tried to convince her to go home, that she'd done enough, but she couldn't leave. Something about finding that young man in the storm had struck a chord deep within her. No pun intended. She thought about her own early days in Nashville, when she'd arrived with nothing but dreams and determination. She'd been lucky. She'd had family support, a place to stay, people who believed in her. But she remembered the fear of failure, the desperation to make it, the nights wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake leaving Oklahoma. The guitar case was old, probably bought secondhand, but it had been maintained with care. The stickers told a story. The Bluebird Cafe, the Basement East, various open mic nights across Nashville. This was someone who'd been trying to make it. Really trying. "Ms. McEntire?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, her scrubs patterned with cheerful musical notes. "Dylan Garrett is stable. The doctor would like to speak with you." Reba followed her down a corridor to a small consultation room where the young doctor from earlier was making notes on a tablet. "Ms. McEntire, thank you for waiting. Mr. Garrett is very lucky you found him when you did. He was in the early stages of hypothermia, and given the temperature drop we're experiencing, another hour might have been fatal." "Will he be okay?" Reba asked, her throat tight. "Yes, we've warmed him carefully, started fluids. He's also severely malnourished and dehydrated, which complicated things. We're going to keep him overnight for observation, but barring any complications, he should make a full recovery." The doctor paused, his expression growing more serious. "Ms. McEntire, I have to ask, do you know Mr. Garrett personally?" "No. I found him tonight." "Why?" "Because when we were examining him, we found evidence that he's been living rough for some time. No permanent address, signs of extended exposure to the elements, malnutrition consistent with food insecurity. His wallet had $17 in it. He has no insurance. The implications hung in the air. I'll cover his medical expenses, Reba said without hesitation. All of them. Just make sure he gets everything he needs. The doctor's eyebrows rose, but he nodded professionally. That's very generous. I'll inform billing. Would you like to see him? He's awake now, though still quite weak. Dylan Garrett's room was in the observation ward, a small space with pale blue walls and the constant beep of monitoring equipment. He was propped up slightly in the bed, an IV in his arm, heated blankets piled around him. His eyes, a striking shade of green, were open but unfocused, staring at the ceiling. When Reba entered, those eyes shifted to her, and confusion crossed his face. "Hi," Reba said softly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I'm Reba. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." Dylan's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Did I? Get hit by a truck, I mean?" "No. I found you at a bus shelter during the storm. You were unconscious. Hypothermia." Dylan closed his eyes, and for a moment Reba thought he'd fallen asleep. But then he spoke again. "You brought me here." "I did." "Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely confused. Reba considered her answer carefully. "Because you needed help, and because no one should be left out in a storm like that." "I had my guitar," Dylan said suddenly, panic entering his voice as he tried to sit up. "Where's my guitar?" "Right here," Reba assured him, touching the case she'd brought in. "Safe and sound." The relief on his face was profound. He sank back into the pillows, tears suddenly streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's all I have left." "Don't apologize," Reba said, her own eyes stinging. "Just rest. Everything else can wait." But Dylan shook his head, the words tumbling out now like he'd been holding them in too long. "I had an apartment, a job. I was making it work, you know? Playing gigs on the weekends, writing during the week. Then my mom got sick. Cancer. She lived in Memphis, no one else to take care of her. So I moved back, took care of her for 18 months until..." He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "I'm so sorry," Reba said quietly. "By the time she passed, I'd lost my apartment here, my gigs, my contacts. I came back to Nashville 3 months ago with $600, thinking I could rebuild. But everything's so expensive now, and without references or a permanent address, no one would rent to me. The money ran out. I've been sleeping in my car when I could afford gas, shelters when I couldn't, street corners when both failed." He laughed bitterly. "Living the Nashville dream, right?" "You kept your guitar," Reba observed. "I could have sold it. I know that. People told me I was stupid for not selling it, but it was my dad's. He died when I was 12, gave it to me before he went. It's a 1968 Gibson J45, worth maybe $3,000. Could have lived on that for months." Dylan's fingers moved as if playing invisible chords. "But then I wouldn't be a musician anymore. I'd just be another guy who gave up." "So you didn't give up," Reba said. "No, ma'am. I play every day, write every day, keep showing up at open mics, keep networking, keep believing that somehow, some way, I'm going to make it." His eyes met hers, fierce despite his weakened state. "That probably sounds pathetic to someone like you." "Someone like me? You're Reba McEntire. You made it. You're living every Nashville musician's dream." Reba smiled sadly. "Dylan, I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly where you are, but I know what it's like to believe in something so hard that you'll sacrifice everything for it. That's not pathetic. That's courage." "Courage didn't keep me warm tonight," Dylan said, closing his eyes again. "You did that. Thank you. I'll pay you back somehow for the hospital. I don't know how, but I will." "We'll figure it out," Reba said, though she had no intention of accepting payment. For now, just focus on getting better. As Dylan drifted into sleep, Reba sat there watching him, thinking about chance and choice, about who we help and why. She could have driven past that bus shelter. Most people would have. It would have been easy to assume someone else would help, to think it wasn't her problem. But she hadn't. And looking at this young man who'd sacrificed everything for his mother and still refused to give up his dreams, Reba was glad she'd stopped. Outside the hospital window, the storm continued its assault on Nashville. But inside this small room, at least one person was warm and safe. For tonight, that was enough. 3 days later, Reba returned to Vanderbilt Medical Center with a bag from Panera Bread and a determination to understand Dylan Garrett better. The storm had passed, leaving Nashville under a brilliant blue sky that made the ice-covered trees sparkle like crystal. The city was slowly recovering. Roads cleared, power restored, life resuming its rhythm. Dylan was scheduled to be discharged that afternoon. The doctors had kept him an extra day due to concerns about his overall health, using the time to address his malnutrition and make sure the hypothermia hadn't caused any lasting damage. Reba had called each day for updates, always identifying herself simply as the woman who brought him in, not wanting any special treatment or recognition. She found Dylan sitting on the edge of his hospital bed, fully dressed in clothes that the hospital social worker had provided from their emergency fund, jeans that actually fit, a warm flannel shirt, a decent winter coat. His guitar case sat on the chair beside him, and he was reading a tattered notebook with intense concentration. "Knock, knock," Reba said from the doorway. Dylan looked up, and his face broke into a genuine smile. "Ms. McEntire, they told me you'd been calling. Please, call me Reba. Ms. McEntire makes me feel like I should be teaching school." She held up the bag. "I brought lunch. Hospital food is terrible, and you need proper nutrition." "You didn't have to do that," Dylan said, but his eyes were on the bag with unmistakable hunger. "I wanted to." Reba set out the containers, a Mediterranean grain bowl, a sandwich, soup, a chocolate chip cookie. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I got variety." They ate together, and Reba was struck by how carefully Dylan savored each bite, like someone who'd gone without food too often to take it for granted. As they ate, she learned more about him. He'd grown up in Memphis, the only child of a music teacher father and a nurse mother. His dad had taught him guitar starting at age 6, filling their small house with the sounds of folk, country, blues, and rock. "Dad used to say that music was the language of emotion," Dylan told her, his eyes distant with memory. "That when you couldn't find the words to say how you felt, you could play it instead. After he died, the guitar was how I talked to him." "I know that sounds strange." "It doesn't sound strange at all," Reba said softly. "Music is how we process life. It's how we remember, how we heal, how we hope." Dylan nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Can I show you something? I mean, I know you're incredibly busy, and you've already done so much, but show me," Reba encouraged. He reached for his guitar case, opening it with the reverence of someone handling something sacred. The Gibson J45 inside was beautiful despite its age, the wood glowing with a patina that only decades of playing could create. Dylan lifted it carefully, his fingers finding their positions automatically. "This is something I wrote about 3 weeks ago," he said. "I was playing at a shelter downtown, trying to earn my keep by entertaining people. There was this elderly woman there, maybe 70, and she told me about her husband who'd died 30 years ago. Said she still talked to him every night before bed, still felt him in the room with her. Inspired this." He began to play, and Reba felt her breath catch. The melody was haunting, simple but profound. built on a progression that felt both familiar and entirely new. Then Dylan started singing, his voice rough from disuse, but carrying a raw emotional honesty that made Reba's professional instincts sit up and take notice. The song was called Empty Chair, and it was about love that persists beyond death, about conversations with memory, about the furniture we keep because throwing it away would be like saying goodbye again. It was devastatingly beautiful. When the last note faded, there was silence in the hospital room. Reba found she had tears in her eyes. "Dylan," she said carefully, "how many songs have you written?" "I've got about 47 that are finished, another dozen or so that are works in progress." He set the guitar down gently. "I write almost every day. Some are good, some are garbage, but I keep writing. Can I hear more?" For the next hour, Dylan played song after song. Some were country, some were folk. Some defied easy categorization. They were songs about loss and hope, about struggle and perseverance, about the small moments that make up a life. They were rough around the edges, needed professional production and arrangement, but the bones were there. Strong, beautiful bones. Reba had been in the music industry for over 40 years. She knew talent when she heard it, and Dylan Garrett had it in abundance. "Dylan," she said when he finally set the guitar aside, "have you ever tried to pitch these to publishers, producers?" He laughed without humor. "I've sent demos to every publisher in Nashville. Got rejection letters from most, no response from the rest. The few meetings I managed to get before everything fell apart, they always said the same thing. Great songs, but no platform. No social media presence, no previous cuts, no industry connections. They wanted writers who were already established. Catch-22, you know?" Reba knew. She knew exactly how the industry worked, how hard it was to break in, how much harder it had gotten in the streaming age. "What if I could help with that?" she found herself saying. Dylan's expression was guarded. "I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not looking for charity. I'm a songwriter, not a project." "I'm not offering charity," Reba said firmly. "I'm recognizing talent. Dylan, you've got something special. Your songs they're real. They're honest. That's rare." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'd like to help you get back on your feet, not because I feel sorry for you, but because I believe in what you can do." "I don't understand," Dylan said quietly. "Let me make some calls. I know people, publishers, producers, venue owners. Let me help connect you with the right folks. But first, you need stability. You can't write songs or make industry connections when you're worried about where you're sleeping tonight. I can't accept—" "You can, and you will," Reba interrupted. "Here's what I'm proposing. I own a small apartment building in East Nashville. Investment property. There's a one-bedroom unit that's been vacant for 2 months. You can stay there, rent-free, for 3 months. That gives you time to get your feet under you, make those connections, maybe start generating income." Dylan was shaking his head, but Reba continued. "In exchange, you work for me part-time. I need someone to help organize my music library, digitize old recordings, general music-related tasks. 20 hours a week at $15 an hour. That gives you income and leaves you time to write and network." "Why would you do this?" Dylan asked, his voice breaking slightly. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. You're someone who gave up everything to care for their dying mother and still didn't give up on their dreams," Reba said simply. "You're someone who'd rather freeze to death than sell their father's guitar. That tells me who you are, Dylan. That tells me enough." Dylan was crying now, not trying to hide it. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Let me help you. Let someone help you for once." "Yes," Dylan whispered. Yes. Thank you. God, thank you. The social worker arrived then to process Dylan's discharge papers. Reba stepped into the hallway to make a phone call to her property manager, Rachel Donovan, explaining the situation and arranging for Dylan to move into the apartment that very day. When she returned to the room, Dylan was carefully packing his guitar away. He looked up at her, and there was something in his expression. Gratitude, yes, but also a fierce determination. I'm going to make you proud, he said. I'm going to work harder than I've ever worked. I'm going to prove this wasn't a mistake. I already know it's not a mistake, Reba assured him. Now come on, let's get you home. The apartment was in a renovated building on Woodland Street, a quiet area with tree-lined streets and a neighborhood feel despite being close to downtown. It was small but clean, with hardwood floors, a decent kitchen, and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. It came furnished with basics: a bed, a couch, a table, dishes. Dylan walked through it slowly, touching things like he couldn't quite believe they were real. This is too much. This is a chance, Reba corrected. What you do with it is up to you. She showed him how to work the heating system, gave him Rachel's number in case anything went wrong, and left a welcome basket on the counter with groceries, toiletries, and a gift card to the local Target. I'll be in touch about the work schedule, she said at the door. For now, rest, recover. Right. Reba, Dylan said as she was leaving. Why me? Really? Reba thought about all the answers she could give, about paying it forward, about recognizing talent, about the random chance that had put her on that street that night. But she settled on the truth. Because I've been lucky in my life and career. Because I had people who helped me when I needed it. And because when you've been given as much as I have, you have a responsibility to give back. She smiled. Plus, those songs are really damn good, and I'm selfish enough to want to see what you do next. That night, back in her own home, Reba couldn't stop thinking about Dylan Garrett. She'd made an impulsive decision, one that her business manager would probably question. But sometimes, the best decisions were the impulsive ones, the ones that came from the heart rather than the head. She thought about that song, Empty Chair, and how it had moved her. She thought about Dylan's voice, raw and honest and real. She thought about his determination to keep creating even when he'd lost everything else. And she thought about the music industry she'd been part of for so long, how it had changed, how hard it had become for new artists to break through. Maybe she could help change that, one songwriter at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dylan had somehow gotten it from Rachel. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you. I won't let you down. Reba smiled and typed back, I know you won't. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, we start building your future. She set the phone down and looked out the window at Nashville's skyline, the city lights twinkling in the cold February night. Music City, they called it. The place where dreams came true and hearts got broken, often in the same afternoon. But tonight, at least, one dream was getting a second chance. And that felt like enough. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity for Dylan Garrett. True to her word, Reba had set him up with work organizing her extensive music archives, a task that was both humbling and educational. She had recordings dating back to her earliest days in Nashville, demos and alternate takes, and live performances that documented an extraordinary career. Dylan handled each one with reverence, cataloging and digitizing while learning lessons about the industry with every song. He worked in Reba's home studio 3 mornings a week, the other 2 mornings reserved for meetings that Reba had been arranging with remarkable efficiency. She'd made good on her promise to open doors, and Dylan found himself sitting across from people he'd only dreamed of meeting. First was Jennifer Walsh, a senior A&R representative at Big Machine Label Group, who specialized in discovering songwriting talent. Reba had sent her 3 of Dylan's demos: Empty Chair, a country ballad called Back Road Philosophy, and an up-tempo number titled Second Chances. Jennifer had listened to all 3 twice before Dylan even arrived at her office. "These are good," she'd said, leaning back in her chair. "Really good. The lyrics are smart, the melodies are sticky. Empty Chair, especially. That's something special." "Thank you," Dylan had managed, trying not to show how nervous he was. "Here's the thing, though. We're not signing songwriters right now unless they come with a significant platform or previous cuts. You've got neither." She'd held up a hand as Dylan's face fell. "But Reba vouching for you opens doors. I'd like to bring you into some co-writing sessions with established writers. See how you work with others? Get you some credits. You good with collaboration?" Dylan had agreed immediately. Over the following weeks, he'd found himself in writing rooms with Nashville veterans. People who'd written hits for everyone from Blake Shelton to Carrie Underwood. The experience was simultaneously intimidating and exhilarating. In one memorable session, he'd worked with Carol Redmond, a 62-year-old writer with 17 #1 hits to her credit. They'd spent an afternoon in her home studio, drinking coffee and swapping stories, and by evening had crafted a song called Mother's Hands that left both of them in tears. "You've got it, kid," Carol had said, giving him a fierce hug as he left. "Whatever it is, that thing that makes songs matter, you've got it in spades." Meanwhile, Dylan's living situation had transformed his creative output. Having a warm, safe place to sleep, regular meals, and freedom from the constant stress of survival had unlocked something in him. He was writing 3, sometimes 4 songs a week, each one better than the last. His apartment had become a sanctuary of creation. The walls were covered with sticky notes containing lyrics and chord progressions. His father's Gibson rarely went back in its case, instead resting on a stand by the window where the light was best. He'd set up a small recording rig, a modest investment from his first paycheck from Reba, to capture ideas when inspiration struck. One Saturday evening in early March, Reba stopped by unannounced, carrying Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "Hope you don't mind company," she said, when Dylan opened the door, clearly surprised. "I was in the neighborhood and thought we could catch up." "Of course," Dylan said, standing aside. "Come in. Though I should warn you, it's a mess. I've been writing all day." "Best kind of mess there is," Reba said, surveying the creative chaos with approval. She noticed a legal pad on the coffee table covered in crossed-out lines and marginal notes. "Working on something new?" "Always," Dylan said, clearing space on the couch. "This one's fighting me, though. Can't quite find the hook." They ate straight from the containers, and Dylan found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did anymore. Reba had that effect. She was genuine, down to earth, treating him like an equal rather than a charity case, despite the obvious disparity in their circumstances. "How are the co-writes going?" she asked, spearing a piece of kung pao chicken. "Incredible. Terrifying. Educational." Dylan laughed. "All of the above. Carol Redmond told me I have potential. I may have that tattooed somewhere." "Carol doesn't give compliments lightly," Reba said. "If she says you have potential, you have it." "I owe all of this to you," Dylan said seriously. "A month ago, I was sleeping in bus shelters. Now, I'm writing with Nashville royalty. It's surreal." Reba set down her container, her expression thoughtful. "Can I tell you something? When I started out, I had people help me. My mama and daddy believed in me even when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. Red Stagel heard me sing at a rodeo and got me to Nashville. Charlie Battles supported me while I was trying to make it. Success in this town is never just about talent. It's about who believes in you and opens doors. But you had the talent to back it up, Dylan pointed out. So do you. That's why I'm helping. This isn't charity, Dylan. This is investment. I believe you're going to do something special, and I want to be part of that journey. Dylan felt emotion thicken his throat. I don't know how to thank you. Write great songs. That's all the thanks I need. Reba paused, then said carefully, Actually, there is something you could help me with, if you're willing. Anything, Dylan said immediately. Reba hesitated, which was unusual for her. I'm working on a new album. It's different from what I've done before. More personal, more stripped down. I've got some songs, but I'm still searching for that centerpiece, that track that defines the whole project. She met his eyes. I keep thinking about Empty Chair. That song has stayed with me. Would you be willing to let me record it? Dylan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. You want to record my song? If you're comfortable with that, obviously, we'd go through proper channels, publisher, mechanical licenses, all that, and you'd get full credit and royalties. But yes, I'd like to record it. I think it could be something special. Reba, that would be? Yes. God, yes. That would be incredible. There's more, Reba continued. I'd like you to be part of the recording process. Come to the studio, give input on arrangement, be present for the session. A lot of times, artists record songs without the writer there, but I think your perspective would be valuable. Dylan couldn't speak. He just nodded, overwhelmed. And, Reba said with a small smile, I'm not the only artist who's heard your work. Jennifer Walsh played Back Road Philosophy for Keith Urban's People. They're interested. And Casey Musgraves' team reached out about second chances. You're kidding, Dylan breathed. I don't kid about music, Reba said. Dylan, what you're doing, it's working. People are noticing. Your songs are getting around town. That's how it happens. One connection at a time, one song at a time. They talked late into the night about music and life and dreams. Reba shared stories from her early days in Nashville, the rejection letters, the doors slammed in her face, the moments when she'd almost given up. She talked about the importance of resilience, of believing in yourself even when no one else did. But here's the thing, she said, as the conversation wound down. Success changes things. You're about to go from unknown to known. That comes with pressure, expectations. People will want pieces of you. You'll have to make tough choices about which opportunities to pursue, which to pass on. How do you handle it? Dylan asked. I stay true to the music, Reba said simply. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. Not the fame, not the money, though those are nice. But whether you're creating something that matters, something that moves people. After Reba left, Dylan sat on his couch with his father's guitar, playing softly. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the loss of his father, the sacrifice for his mother, the months of homelessness, the night of the storm. Each moment had shaped him, had informed his writing, had made him who he was. He began playing Empty Chair again, but this time imagining how it might sound with full production, with Reba's powerful voice bringing his words to life. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Walsh. Coffee Monday? Want to discuss publishing deal? Dylan stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure it was real. A publishing deal. 4 weeks ago, he'd been sleeping in a bus shelter. Now he was on the verge of getting signed. He thought about what Reba had said, that success in Nashville was about who believed in you and opened doors. But it was also about being ready when those doors opened. about having done the work, honed the craft, paid the dues. Dylan had done all of that. The years of writing, the late nights perfecting melodies, the rejection letters that he'd kept as motivation, all of it had prepared him for this moment. He picked up his phone and texted back, "Monday works. Thank you for this opportunity." Then he opened his notebook and started writing. A new song was forming, something about second chances and winter storms and the kindness of strangers. It wasn't ready yet, but it would be. Outside his window, Nashville was settling into sleep, its music venues winding down, its dreamers heading home to rest before tomorrow's hustle began again. Dylan Garrett was one of those dreamers now, not sleeping in doorways or wondering where his next meal would come from, but building something real, something sustainable. All because one person had stopped to help on a cold winter night. All because someone had believed. By late March, Reba McEntire was facing the biggest professional crisis of her recent career, and it had come completely out of nowhere. The call had come from her label president, Mitchell Reynolds, on a Tuesday afternoon. Reba had been in her home office, reviewing contracts for her upcoming tour, when her phone rang. "Reba, we need to talk about the album," Mitchell said, without preamble. His voice had that carefully neutral tone that people use when delivering bad news. "What about it?" Reba set down her pen, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. "The marketing team and I have been reviewing the tracks you've submitted. We're concerned." "Concerned how?" Mitchell sighed. "They're good songs, Reba. Professional, well-crafted, but they're not exciting. They don't feel fresh. In today's market, especially with the streaming algorithms, we need something that's going to catch fire, generate buzz. What you've given us feels safe." The words stung more than Reba wanted to admit. She'd been working on this album for 8 months, carefully selecting songs from Nashville's best writers, recording with top-tier musicians. Safe had never been her goal. "What are you saying, Mitchell?" "I'm saying we need to delay the release. Push it back 6 months while we find material that's going to make an impact. The title track especially. We need something stronger. Something that defines not just the album, but this phase of your career." "We've already announced the June release date," Reba protested. "We've got tour dates built around it, promotional commitments." "I know, and I'm sorry. But releasing an album that underperforms doesn't help anyone. We need to get this right." After the call ended, Reba sat in silence, staring at her platinum records on the wall. 40-plus years in this business, and she was still fighting to prove herself. Still subject to the whims of label executives and market trends. The worst part was that Mitchell wasn't entirely wrong. She'd been feeling it herself. A certain lack of inspiration with the material she'd chosen. She'd been playing it safe, selecting songs that fit her brand rather than songs that challenged her, moved her, meant something. The album was called Reflections, meant to be a mature examination of life, love, and lessons learned. But somewhere in the process of making it, she'd lost the thread, the emotional core that should have tied everything together. She needed that centerpiece song Mitchell had mentioned. She'd thought she had it. But listening with fresh ears, she realized the track was competent but forgettable. It didn't have heart. Over the next week, Reba threw herself into finding new material. She listened to hundreds of demos, reached out to writers she'd worked with before, asked her team to cast a wider net. Nothing clicked. Everything felt like a retread of things she'd done before. Or worse, like a desperate attempt to chase trends she was too old to credibly pull off. Her creative block began affecting other areas of her life. She became short-tempered at rehearsals, distracted during meetings. Her sleep suffered. She'd lie awake at 3 a.m., running through melodies in her head, searching for that elusive spark. Dylan noticed the change. He'd been coming to her house studio for his archiving work, and he could see the stress etched in her face, the tension in her shoulders. "Everything okay?" he asked one morning, finding her staring blankly at a wall of CDs. Reba startled, having forgotten he was there. "Just label stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But Dylan was perceptive. Over the weeks of working together, they'd developed a friendship built on mutual respect and shared passion for music. He knew when something was wrong. "Want to talk about it?" he offered carefully. Sometimes talking helps. Reba considered deflecting again, but something about Dylan's earnest concern broke through her defenses. "The album's in trouble. Label wants to delay it. They don't think the material is strong enough. The album with Empty Chair? That's one of the few tracks they do like," Reba admitted. "But it's not enough to carry the whole project. I need something more. A title track that defines the album, gives it identity. And I've got nothing." Dylan was quiet for a moment, thinking. "What do you want the album to say? Not what the label wants, not what you think the market wants. What do you want to say?" The question cut straight to the heart of the problem. Reba realized she'd been so focused on meeting expectations, the labels, the fans, the industries, that she'd lost sight of her own artistic vision. "I want to talk about resilience," she said slowly, the words forming as she spoke them. "About how we survive the hard things. About finding grace in struggle, hope in darkness. About the people who help us when we're down, and how we can be those people for others." Dylan's eyes lit up. "That's a great theme. That's what Empty Chair is about. Finding connection even in loss. Why not build the rest of the album around that idea?" "Because I can't find the songs," Reba said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I've listened to hundreds of demos. Nothing fits." "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places," Dylan suggested. "Maybe instead of trying to find the perfect finished song, you need to create it. Write it yourself." Reba shook her head. "I'm not a songwriter. I've co-written a few things over the years, but it's not my strength." "You're a storyteller," Dylan countered. "Every time you sing, you tell a story. That's what songwriting is. Storytelling set to music." "I don't have time to learn songwriting right now," Reba said tiredly. "I need a solution, not a new skill." Dylan hesitated, then said carefully, "What if we wrote it together? You know what you want to say. I know how to structure a song. We could collaborate." The offer hung in the air between them. Reba's first instinct was to say no. Dylan was talented, yes, but he was still building his career. Collaborating with him on something this important felt risky. But then she thought about Empty Chair and how it had moved her. She thought about the other songs Dylan had written, their emotional honesty and lyrical depth. She thought about having nothing to lose. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Let's try." They started that afternoon, clearing space in Reba's studio and settling in with guitars, notebooks, and strong coffee. Dylan asked questions about Reba's life, her experiences, the moments that had shaped her. She found herself opening up in ways she rarely did, talking about struggles and fears and triumphs she'd never put into words before. "Tell me about a time someone helped you when you really needed it," Dylan prompted. Reba thought back to her early days in Nashville, newly divorced, trying to establish herself as a solo artist. There was this producer, Harold Shedd. I was nobody, but he believed in me. Spent hours in the studio getting the sound right. Never made me feel like I was wasting his time. When my first single tanked, he didn't give up on me. Just said, "Next one will be better." And it was. Dylan scribbled notes. What did that feel like? Having someone believe in you? Like I could breathe again. Like maybe I wasn't crazy for trying to do this. Reba's voice was soft with memory. It gave me courage to keep going. "There's your song," Dylan said. That's what you want to say. How belief and kindness give people courage to keep going. How we all need someone to believe in us. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, melody and lyrics emerging gradually. It wasn't easy. They hit dead ends, scrapped verses, argued over chord progressions, but slowly, something began to take shape. The chorus came first, Reba humming a melody that Dylan immediately recognized as special. They refined it together, finding the perfect balance of memorable and meaningful. When I was falling through the dark, you were the light that found me. When I had nothing left to give, you gave everything around me. Now I stand tall. I've found my wings, all because of grace and belief. You saved me when I needed saving, gave me strength to still believe. Working the verses was harder. They went through multiple drafts, trying to capture the specificity of struggle without being maudlin, the gratitude without being saccharine. Dylan pushed Reba to be more vulnerable than she was comfortable with. But he was right. The vulnerability made it real. By midnight, they had a complete song. Rough, unpolished, but undeniably powerful. They recorded a simple guitar-vocal demo, Reba's voice cracking with emotion on certain lines. When they listened back, there were tears in both their eyes. "This is it," Reba whispered. "This is what the album needed." "It's your story," Dylan said. "Your truth. That's always what connects with people, when you're brave enough to be honest." Over the next 2 weeks, they refined the song, brought in Reba's regular producer to add full instrumentation, recorded a final version. They titled it Grace and Belief, and it became not just the title track, but the anchor point around which the entire album reorganized itself. Reba went back through the songs she'd already recorded, keeping only the ones that fit the themes of resilience and hope. She added Empty Chair, recorded 2 more Dylan originals that fit perfectly, and commissioned 3 new songs from other writers working within the same thematic framework. When she presented the revised album to Mitchell Reynolds, his reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "This," he said, after listening to Grace and Belief for the second time, "this is what we needed. This is authentic Reba. Powerful, emotional, meaningful. This is going to connect." "We're back on for June?" Reba asked. "Hell yes, and I want Grace and Belief as the first single. Get radio working on it immediately." After the meeting, Reba called Dylan with the news. His excitement was palpable even through the phone. "I knew it would work," he said. "I knew once you tapped into what you really wanted to say, it would be powerful. Dylan, I can't thank you enough. You didn't just help me write a song, you helped me find my way back to why I do this." "You did the same for me," Dylan said quietly. "You saved my life, Reba. Literally. And then you gave me a chance to do what I love. This song? This was the least I could do to thank you." "This is more than thanks," Reba said. "This is a hit. And when it is, everyone's going to know your name." She was right. When Grace and Belief was released to radio in mid-April, the response was overwhelming. DJs loved it, critics praised it, and most importantly, listeners connected with it in a profound way. Within 2 weeks, it was the most added song at country radio. Within 4, it had entered the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. For Reba, it represented a career rejuvenation, proof that she could still create relevant, meaningful music that resonated with audiences. For Dylan, it was a launching pad. His name as co-writer started appearing in industry publications, and his phone began ringing with collaboration requests. But more than professional success, the song had created something else. A deep artistic partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. They'd faced a creative crisis together and emerged stronger. And they'd proven something Reba had always believed, that music has the power to transform lives, to heal wounds, to connect people across all differences, one song at a time, one belief at a time, one act of grace at a time. 1 month after Grace and Belief hit country radio, Nashville was experiencing an unseasonably warm May evening. The air carried the scent of blooming dogwoods, and Lower Broadway pulsed with its usual Friday night energy. Tourists and locals mingling, live music spilling from every honky-tonk, the city vibrating with possibility. Reba McEntire stood backstage at the Ryman Auditorium, the mother church of country music, preparing for a special acoustic performance to celebrate the release of her Reflections album. The show had sold out in minutes, and the energy in the historic venue was electric. But tonight wasn't just about her. Tonight was about completing a circle that had begun 3 months ago in a winter storm. 5 minutes, Ms. McEntire, the stage manager called. Thank you, Reba replied, checking her appearance one last time in the mirror. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, her red hair styled in soft waves. This wasn't a costume or a persona. Tonight was about authenticity. There was a knock on the dressing room door. "Come in," Reba called. Dylan Garrett entered, and Reba almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the gaunt, desperate young man she'd found at that bus shelter. In his place stood someone who looked healthy, confident, alive. He wore dark jeans and a sport coat over a white shirt, his hair neatly trimmed, carrying his father's Gibson guitar with the ease of someone who belonged on that stage. "Ready?" Reba asked with a warm smile. "Terrified," Dylan admitted, "but ready." The plan for tonight's show was simple but powerful. Reba would perform an acoustic set of songs from the new album, telling the stories behind each one. And then, for the encore, she would bring out Dylan to perform Grace and Belief together, their first public performance of the song they'd written as partners. It would also be Dylan's coming out party to the Nashville music community. In the audience were publishers, producers, artists, and industry executives. Jennifer Walsh had finally offered him that publishing deal, a 3-year contract that provided financial stability and creative support. Keith Urban had put Backroad Philosophy on hold for his next album. Casey Musgraves had recorded Second Chances and was planning to release it as a single. Dylan's life had transformed completely. He'd gone from unknown and homeless to being one of Nashville's most talked-about new songwriters. Magazine articles were being written about his story, radio interviews scheduled, collaboration requests flooding in. But success, as Reba had warned him, came with complications. Dylan had spent the last month navigating contracts, legal agreements, and the complex politics of the music industry. He'd had to hire a lawyer and an accountant. He'd dealt with people who suddenly wanted to be his friend, now that he was valuable. He'd faced the pressure of expectation, the fear that he couldn't write anything as good as what he'd already done. Through it all, Reba had been there with advice, support, and occasional tough love when he needed it. "Remember," she said now, placing a hand on his shoulder, "this is just music. That's all it ever is. Don't let the industry part overwhelm the art part. Stay connected to why you write." "I will," Dylan promised, "though having you as a guide makes it easier. You've taught me that the music matters more than the machinery around it." The stage manager appeared again. "Ms. McEntire, we're ready." Reba squeezed Dylan's shoulder once more. "Stay here. I'll call you out when it's time. Just play from the heart, like you always do." She walked onto the Ryman stage to thunderous applause. The legendary wooden pews were packed with people who'd grown up with her music, who'd followed her career through its many chapters. Under the warm stage lights, with her acoustic guitar slung over her shoulder, Reba felt at home. "Good evening, Nashville," she said into the microphone, and the crowd roared. "Thank you for being here tonight. This is special for me, this room, this album, this moment. Reflections is the most personal project I've done in years, and I want to share the stories behind these songs with you." For the next 90 minutes, Reba held the audience captive. She performed stripped-down versions of the album tracks, each introduced with intimate stories about their creation. She talked about loss and resilience, about the people who'd shaped her life, about finding meaning in struggle. When she performed Empty Chair, she told the story of finding Dylan that winter night, though she kept his identity anonymous, calling him a young musician who reminded me why we do this. The song resonated even more powerfully in this acoustic setting. Her voice raw with emotion, the audience completely silent except for occasional sniffles as people wiped away tears. As the main set drew to a close, Reba set down her guitar and addressed the crowd with a more serious tone. "Before I go, I want to talk about something that matters to me. This industry, this beautiful, brutal, wonderful industry, is built on talent, yes, but it's also built on luck, timing, and most importantly, on people helping people. Every successful artist you know had someone who believed in them, who opened a door, who gave them a chance." She paused, letting the words sink in. "3 months ago, I met someone who had all the talent in the world but none of the breaks. He'd given up everything to care for his dying mother, and when he came back to Nashville to rebuild his life, he had nothing. No home, no connections, no safety net, just a guitar and songs that needed to be heard." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "I want to introduce you to that person now. He's not just a talented songwriter, he's my co-writer on the title track of this album, a song that saved this entire project when I was lost creatively. He's a reminder that genius doesn't always come wrapped in privilege, that sometimes the best artists are the ones struggling the hardest to be heard." Reba turned toward the wings. "Dylan Garrett, would you come out here, please?" Dylan walked onto the Ryman stage, his father's guitar in hand, and the applause began before he'd taken 3 steps. It grew louder as he reached Reba's side, the industry professionals in the audience understanding the significance of this moment. A major artist publicly endorsing an unknown writer. Dylan looked overwhelmed, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he took in the historic venue, the sea of faces, the moment he'd dreamed of his entire life. "Hi," he said into the microphone Reba handed him, his voice rough with emotion. I don't have words. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in a bus shelter, thinking my dreams were over. Then this incredible woman stopped her car in a storm and saved my life. Not just physically. She saved everything I was working toward." He looked at Reba, who smiled encouragingly. "We wrote this next song together," Dylan continued. "It's about what happens when someone believes in you, when someone gives you grace at your lowest moment. It's about second chances and the courage that comes from knowing someone's in your corner." They sat on stools side by side, adjusting their guitars. For a moment, they looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Then Reba counted them in, and they began to play. The song sounded different performed this way, more intimate than the produced version that had been on the radio. Dylan's voice blended with Reba's in harmonies they'd practiced for hours, their guitars interweaving in complementary patterns. When they reached the chorus, the entire audience seemed to lean forward, caught in the emotional current of the music. Dylan took the second verse solo, his voice gaining confidence as he sang words he'd helped write. "I was broken. I was falling. Didn't think I'd see tomorrow, lost in darkness, barely breathing, drowning in my sorrow. Then you reached out through the storm, gave me shelter, gave me warmth, showed me kindness has the power to help a soul transform. When they returned to the chorus together, Reba's powerful voice supporting Dylan's rougher one, something magical happened. The song transcended its individual components and became something greater, a statement about human connection, about the transformative power of compassion. The final note hung in the air for a heartbeat before the Ryman erupted. The audience rose to their feet as one, applause mixing with cheers and whistles. People were crying openly, moved by both the song and the story behind it. Reba and Dylan stood, taking bows together. Then Reba gestured for quiet, and gradually the crowd settled. "This young man is going to be a star," she said firmly. "His songs are already being recorded by some of the biggest names in country music. But more than that, he's a reminder of something we sometimes forget in this business. That talent is everywhere, that dreams don't discriminate based on circumstances, and that sometimes the difference between success and failure is just someone willing to help." She turned to Dylan. "Thank you for reminding me why I do this. Thank you for your courage, your talent, and your heart. And thank you for that night in the storm, for holding on to your guitar, even when you had nothing else. That guitar, those songs, that determination, it changed both our lives." Dylan hugged her, not caring that hundreds of people were watching, not caring about industry protocol or professional distance. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Backstage after the show, they were mobbed by well-wishers. Industry people who'd heard about Dylan but never met him introduced themselves, offering congratulations and business cards. Artists expressed interest in his catalog. Producers wanted to work with him. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. Jennifer Walsh pulled Dylan aside at one point, her face lit with excitement. "Do you know what you just did? You just announced yourself to Music City in the best possible way. My phone's already buzzing with people wanting to work with you." "I'm still processing," Dylan admitted, watching Reba across the room holding court with a group of journalists. "Process quickly," Jennifer advised with a laugh, "because your life's about to get very busy." Later, after the crowd had thinned and the Ryman was closing down, Reba and Dylan sat together on the edge of the stage, legs dangling over the side, looking out at the empty pews. "You know what's wild?" Dylan said. 4 months ago, I was at rock bottom, literally on the street, hypothermic, probably hours from dying. Tonight, I performed at the Ryman Auditorium. How is that even possible?" "It's possible because you never gave up on yourself," Reba said. "Even when you had every reason to, you kept writing, kept playing, kept believing. I just gave you a platform. You did the rest. You gave me more than a platform. You gave me hope when I had none. You saw me when I was invisible." Reba was quiet for a moment, thinking about that night in February, about the choice to stop the car, about all the small decisions that had led to this moment. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Finding you that night. It helped me as much as it helped you. I'd been in a rut creatively, going through the motions, playing it safe. You reminded me what it means to fight for something you believe in. Working with you on these songs, seeing your hunger and dedication, it reignited something in me that I didn't even realize I'd lost." "So we saved each other," Dylan said. "Maybe we did," Reba agreed. "Maybe that's how it's supposed to work. We're all just helping each other along, sharing what we have, lifting each other up." Dylan pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, something he'd taken to doing occasionally just to confirm it was real. The publishing advance from Jennifer had hit his account yesterday. For the first time in his life, He had financial security. "I want to do something," he said suddenly. "I want to set up a fund or a foundation or something to help other musicians who are struggling the way I was. People sleeping in their cars, choosing between food and guitar strings, one crisis away from giving up their dreams." Reba looked at him with profound respect. "That's a beautiful idea. Would you help me set it up? Maybe we could do it together." The Reba McEntire and Dylan Garrett Foundation for Struggling Musicians or something. "How about just the Nashville Musicians Emergency Fund?" Reba suggested. "Keep the focus on the mission, not the names." "Even better," Dylan agreed. "We could provide small grants for housing deposits, medical bills, instrument repairs, the kind of immediate needs that derail careers." They talked late into the night, sitting on that stage, planning how they could help others the way Reba had helped Dylan. They discussed board members, fundraising strategies, application processes. It felt right, this next step, taking the grace that had been given and multiplying it outward. Finally, as midnight approached, they left the Ryman and walked out into the warm Nashville night. The city hummed around them, its music venues still alive with sound, its dreamers still chasing their chances. "Want to grab some food?" Reba asked. "I know a late-night diner that makes the best pie in Tennessee." "Absolutely," Dylan said, "though I'm buying. I can actually afford to buy dinner now." They walked down Broadway, just two musicians among thousands, united by shared experience and mutual respect. Tourists snapped pictures when they recognized Reba, but she waved them off politely, wanting to preserve this moment of normalcy. At the diner, squeezed into a corner booth, they ordered coffee and pie and talked about everything except music. Favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams beyond their careers. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of friendship that transcends professional boundaries. "You know what I've learned from all this?" Dylan said, finishing his slice of chocolate cream pie. "Success isn't just about talent or hard work or even luck. It's about being open to help when it comes and being willing to help others when you can. It's about connection." "That's wisdom," Reba said. "Hold on to that as things get crazy. And they will get crazy. Hit songs, awards shows, business pressures. Don't lose sight of why you started writing in the first place." "I won't," Dylan promised. "I've got a good reminder." He touched the guitar case beside him. "Every time I play this, I remember my dad teaching me chords in our living room. I remember my mom listening to my songs even when they were terrible. I remember freezing in that bus shelter, choosing to keep this guitar instead of selling it for survival money. All of that keeps me grounded." "Good," Reba said. "Because you've got a real gift, Dylan. The industry's going to want to shape you, mold you into what they think will sell. But the best artists are the ones who stay true to themselves, who write from authentic places." As they left the diner and walked toward their cars, Dylan stopped suddenly. "What is it?" Reba asked. "I was just thinking about that night. If you'd driven past that bus shelter, if you hadn't stopped, I'd probably be dead. Or if I'd survived, I'd still be out there, still struggling, still invisible. One choice, one moment of kindness, changed everything." "It wasn't just kindness," Reba said. "It was recognizing myself in you. Seeing someone who loved music so much, they'd sacrifice everything for it. I couldn't leave that person behind." They stood there on the sidewalk, traffic passing, Nashville's neon glow painting everything in shades of blue and gold. "I'm going to make you proud," Dylan said. "Everything you've invested in me, your time, your money, your reputation, I'm going to honor that by being the best songwriter I can be." "You already have," Reba assured him. "Just keep being you. That's all I ask." They hugged goodbye, and as Dylan drove back to his apartment, his warm, safe apartment with its walls covered in lyrics, and its windows overlooking a neighborhood he was becoming part of, he thought about the journey from rock bottom to the Ryman stage. At home, he sat by the window with his father's guitar, playing softly so as not to disturb his neighbors. A new song was forming, something about circles and second chances, about storms that bring unexpected gifts. His phone buzzed with a text from Reba. "Forgot to tell you, Grace and Belief just hit #1 on iTunes Country Chart. Congratulations, hit songwriter." Dylan stared at the message, reading it over and over. #1, his first #1 song, co-written with one of country music's legends, and it had happened just 4 months after he'd been homeless and hopeless. He looked around his apartment, at the life he'd rebuilt with help and hard work. He thought about the foundation they'd planned, about all the other Dylan Garretts out there struggling in the shadows, waiting for their chance, and he understood finally what Reba had been trying to teach him all along. Success wasn't just about achieving your own dreams. It was about reaching back to help the next person climbing up behind you. It was about taking the grace you'd been given and passing it forward. He picked up his guitar and began to write, the melody flowing easily now, the lyrics coming from a place of gratitude and hope. "I was falling through the dark when you became my light, gave me shelter from the storm. On that frozen winter night, now I'm standing tall again, with a chance to spread my wings, all because one person stopped to see my suffering." The song would be called "One Person," and it would be his gift back to Reba, to the city that had embraced him, to everyone who'd ever helped a stranger in need. Outside his window, Nashville sparkled under a clear May sky, so different from that February storm that had changed everything. But Dylan understood now that storms came in many forms. Some brought rain and ice, others brought opportunity and transformation. The key was being open to both, being ready when lightning struck, and never, ever giving up on the songs that lived inside you, waiting to be born. 6 months later, Dylan Garrett stood in the Bridgestone Arena, watching Reba McEntire accept the CMA Award for Female Vocalist of the Year. In her acceptance speech, she thanked her band, her label, her fans, and then she did something unexpected. "I want to thank my co-writer, Dylan Garrett," she said, holding the trophy high. "Our song, Grace and Belief, reminded me why I do this. And the Nashville Musicians Emergency Fund we started together is changing lives. That's what music should do, change lives." The camera found Dylan in the audience, and he waved, overwhelmed by the moment. Beside him sat Jennifer Walsh, who'd become not just his publisher, but his mentor. In his pocket was a check for royalties from 3 different artists who'd recorded his songs. On his wrist was a watch his mother had given his father 40 years ago. He'd been able to retrieve it from the pawn shop where he'd sold it during his desperate days. Everything had come full circle, and it had all started with a woman who chose to stop her car in a storm, who saw past the circumstances to the person beneath, who believed that one act of kindness could change a life. Reba had been right about that. One act of kindness had changed a life. It had changed 2 lives. And through the foundation they'd created, through the songs they'd written, through the example they'd set, it was changing countless others. Because that's what grace does. It multiplies, it transforms, it saves. One person at a time, one song at a time, one cold winter night at a time.